At the top of a lonely Kentucky hill stands the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, once a place of healing, now a monument to suffering. Built in 1910 to treat tuberculosis patients, it soon earned a darker reputation. Thousands entered its halls seeking a cure, but most never left. During the height of the TB epidemic, the hospital was overflowing. Doctors experimented with brutal, desperate procedures. Lungs collapsed with needles, ribs cut open to let the disease escape. Those who died were quietly removed through the body chute, a long underground tunnel designed to hide the dead from the living. After the sanatorium closed, the building stood abandoned, a silent skeleton of brick and decay. Locals began sneaking inside, drawn by the legends. They spoke of shadow people gliding down the halls, doors slamming on their own, and ghostly voices calling for help from the 5th floor. In 2001, a small paranormal team decided to spend a weekend inside Waverly Hills to document the truth. They were professionals, not thrill seekers, armed with cameras, recorders, and EMF scanners. But what they captured would never let them sleep again. Because in the silence of those endless corridors, something watched them. Something that had never left since the hospital's final breath. That weekend became known as one of the most chilling investigations in American paranormal history. And now, this is their story. The team arrived at Waverly Hills just before dusk. 4 investigators: Evan, the leader; Riley, the tech specialist; Sarah, the psychic sensitive; and Mark, the skeptic with a camera permanently fixed to his shoulder. The air outside the sanatorium was unnaturally still, as if the hill itself held its breath. As the rusted gates groaned open, the massive building loomed before them. 5 stories of concrete and sorrow. Vines crept up broken windows, and the entrance doors hung off their hinges. "It feels like it's watching us," Sarah whispered. Evan brushed it off, but deep inside he felt it too. They set up their base in the old lobby. The smell of rot and mildew clung to the air. Mark turned on his flashlight, sweeping across the cracked tiles and dusty reception desk. "Thousands died here," Riley murmured. "And some say they never left." By nightfall, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath fogged as they climbed the stairs to the upper floors. The sound of their boots echoed through endless hallways, each lined with rooms of rusted beds and faded charts. Evan stopped suddenly, his EMF meter spiked red. "Something's near," he whispered. From the far end of the corridor, a door slammed shut, hard. Sarah froze. "It doesn't want us here," she said, her voice trembling. Mark laughed nervously. "Probably the wind." But when he replayed his footage, a faint whisper bled through the static. "Get out!" Their flashlights flickered, and the shadows at the end of the hallway seemed to shift, as if something unseen moved just beyond the light. It was only their first night. But already, Waverly Hills had begun to wake. By the second night, the team was more determined than afraid. The strange whisper caught on Mark's footage had given them purpose. Evan planned to explore the 5th floor, a level infamous in Waverly's history. According to local legends, room 502 was where a nurse had taken her own life after discovering she was pregnant and infected with tuberculosis. Since then, many who entered that room claimed to hear her voice. The staircase creaked under their feet as they climbed. The higher they went, the colder it became. The light from Riley's camera wavered, as static hissed through his headset. "Batteries draining too fast," he muttered. "Something's interfering." The 5th floor greeted them with a heavy silence. Broken wheelchairs and overturned gurneys lined the walls. Sarah paused, her breath quickening. "She's here," she whispered. "She's watching us." They reached room 502. The door hung open, swaying slightly though no wind blew. Inside, a single light bulb dangled from the ceiling, swinging as if stirred by unseen hands. Mark's camera focused on a dark stain spreading across the cracked floor tiles. "That wasn't here before," he said quietly. Suddenly, the EMF meter shrieked. Sarah clutched her head. "She's screaming," she gasped. "She's screaming for help." Then, a faint, unmistakable voice echoed from the corner of the room. "I didn't want to die." Evan froze, the color draining from his face. "Did everyone hear that?" he whispered. They nodded silently. The voice came again, louder this time, distorted and desperate. "Get out!" The lights flickered violently, then went out completely. In that darkness, something cold brushed against Evan's neck. He turned and saw the outline of a nurse standing inches away, her face twisted in sorrow. The team stumbled back from room 502, hearts pounding, flashlights trembling in their hands. Evan could still feel the icy touch on his neck, the kind that burned into memory. Sarah muttered prayers under her breath, while Riley checked his camera. "It's all here," he whispered shakily. "The voice, the flickering, even the shadow behind you." Evan looked at the tiny screen. For a brief moment, the footage showed a dark figure standing directly behind him. Featureless, humanoid, tall, its head slightly tilted as if studying him. Then it vanished. They decided to head back down the hall, but something about the corridor felt different. The air was thicker now, oppressive. The once faint whispers had turned into indistinct muttering, dozens of overlapping voices, growing louder as they walked. Mark pointed his light ahead. "Wait, do you see that?" At the end of the hallway, a shadow stood against the wall. It wasn't cast by anyone. It moved independently, gliding along the cracked plaster like oil spreading through water. Every time they stepped forward, it mirrored them. When they stopped, it stopped. Sarah's voice trembled. "It's following our movements." Riley tried to shine his light directly at it, but the beam bent away as though swallowed by darkness. Then the shadow elongated, stretching unnaturally until it covered the walls and ceiling, enveloping the hallway in total blackness. A deep, guttural moan rolled through the corridor. The temperature dropped so sharply that their breath turned to mist. Something invisible brushed past Riley, knocking the camera from his hand. It hit the floor, still recording, catching. For a split second, a face inside the shadow. It wasn't human. By the time the group reached the ground floor again, something in the building felt heavier, almost alive. The old sanatorium groaned with each gust of wind, but underneath it all, they could hear a faint, rhythmic sound. It wasn't the wind. It was a slow, deliberate thumping, like footsteps coming from beneath the floorboards. Sarah stopped near a rusted metal door at the end of the hallway. A hand-painted sign above it read, "Morgue, restricted access." The thumping grew louder as they approached, echoing through the tiles. "We shouldn't go down there," Sarah whispered. "That's where they kept the dead before burial." But Evan, driven by something between curiosity and dread, said if the activity's strongest down there, that's where we need to be. Riley pushed the door open. A wave of stale, freezing air hit them. The staircase descended into pitch-black darkness. The smell was unbearable, a mix of rust, mold, and something faintly organic. Mark's voice cracked as he muttered, "It smells like blood." They set up lights at the top of the stairs, but the beams only reached halfway down before vanishing into the void. One by one they descended, their footsteps echoing louder than they should have. The air grew colder with every step, and the temperature gauge in Riley's hand began to plummet. At the bottom, they found old gurneys lined up like skeletal remains. The morgue drawers were still sealed, some marked with faded names and dates from the 1930s. Then came the sound, the thumping again, now behind the farthest drawer. Evan approached it slowly. He placed his hand on the cold metal handle. The sound stopped. Then from inside, a whisper, soft, rasping, and unmistakably human. "Help me." The team froze in the dim basement light. The whisper, fragile yet unmistakably alive, came again from behind the morgue drawer. "Help me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It's trapped," she murmured. "It doesn't know it's dead." Evan, trembling but determined, reached for the drawer's handle. The metal was icy cold, colder than anything natural. As he pulled it open, the air thickened. The smell of decay hit them like a wall. Inside was only darkness and a stained white sheet. No body, no bones. Nothing but a void that seemed deeper than the drawer itself. Riley turned the camera toward it, zooming in. The lens flickered and distorted as though fighting interference. "It's reading impossible EMF spikes," he whispered. "Something's inside it, but not physically." Suddenly, a gust of freezing wind burst out from the drawer, knocking the camera from Riley's hands. The basement lights flickered wildly. The gurneys began to roll on their own, screeching against the tiles. Mark shouted, "We have to get out!" But Sarah didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the drawer. "It wants to show us something," she said in a monotone voice, stepping closer. Evan grabbed her arm. "Sarah, stop." Too late. She touched the edge of the drawer and instantly gasped, collapsing to her knees. Her pupils dilated, her voice changing, whispering words none of them understood. It wasn't English. It wasn't human. The EMF meter screamed red. Then, a shape formed in the mist rising from the open drawer. A figure draped in white, face twisted, eyes hollow yet filled with grief. The lights cut out completely. In total darkness, they heard one more whisper, inches from their ears. "Don't open the others." When the lights flickered back on, Sarah lay unconscious on the cold tile floor. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow, and frost had formed around her fingertips. Riley knelt beside her, shaking her gently. "Sarah, can you hear me?" She gasped suddenly, her eyes wide open, but for a few seconds she didn't seem to recognize any of them. Evan pulled her upright. "What happened? What did you see?" Sarah's voice came out hoarse. They were screaming. So many of them. Men, women, children, all trapped down here. They can't move on. They're bound to this place. Her eyes darted toward the morgue drawers. It started with them. The basement suddenly groaned, the pipes rattling like something massive had shifted beneath the building. The temperature dropped again, and their flashlights flickered one by one. Mark looked around nervously. "We need to go back upstairs now." But as they turned to leave, a new sound filled the air, faint, echoing laughter. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, layered and distorted. Riley lifted his camera and caught a glimpse of movement. Dozens of shadowy figures lining the walls, their faces turned toward the team. Evan swung his light toward them. But the moment the beam touched them, they vanished, only to reappear closer, their shapes flickering in and out of reality. "They're surrounding us," Riley whispered. Sarah clutched her head, tears streaming down her face. "They're begging," she said. "Begging us to leave before it's too late." A low rumble shook the floor, and dust fell from the ceiling. The walls seemed to pulse with life. As they fled up the stairs, the laughter grew louder, twisting, hysterical, until it transformed into a scream that followed them through every corridor. The group burst out of the basement door, gasping for air as the old hinges slammed shut behind them with a metallic bang. The sound echoed through the empty corridors of Waverly Hills. And for a moment, there was only silence, until the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above began to distort, flickering in rhythm with Sarah's ragged breathing. Evan steadied her. "You're safe. We're back upstairs." But Sarah shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "It followed us." Mark panned his camera across the hallway. The footage revealed something none of them could see with the naked eye. A faint humanoid shape gliding just behind Evan, moving with unnatural fluidity. Riley checked his EMF meter. It was maxing out. "It's with us," he said, panic breaking through his voice. They reached the old surgical ward, a massive room with rows of broken beds and shattered windows. The smell of antiseptic still lingered faintly, decades old. Evan set up a thermal camera near the far wall, determined to document everything. "We finished the investigation," he insisted, though fear was written across his face. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted again. Frost crept along the metal bed frames. The camera screen flickered and then froze. A single figure appeared on the display. A nurse in a 1940s uniform, her face a blur of shadow. Sarah stared at the screen, whispering, "She's one of them. The ones who never left." Then the sound of heels clicked against the tile floor, slow and deliberate, though no one was moving. The noise circled them, echoing from all directions. The last light bulb overhead shattered with a sharp crack. In the brief flash that followed, Evan saw her standing right behind Sarah, tall, pale, and smiling with lips far too wide to be human. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air in the surgical ward felt dense, pressing against their chests. The nurse's figure stood perfectly still behind Sarah, her head tilted slightly, her grin stretching far beyond the limits of human anatomy. When Evan blinked, she was gone, but the cold, suffocating presence remained. Riley's camera continued to roll, though the feed was distorted, the image fractured by static. Between the interference, frames showed her standing in multiple places at once, watching them, waiting. Sarah pressed her hands to her ears. "She's whispering to me," she said. "She wants me to help her finish something." "What do you mean?" Evan demanded, his voice trembling. "She said, 'Room 306. Mark swallowed hard. "That's the isolation ward. For the terminal patients." The sound of shuffling footsteps came from the hallway. Dozens of them. Evan turned his flashlight toward the doorway, and the beam illuminated faint, wet footprints leading deeper into the building. They weren't theirs. The team followed them reluctantly, each step echoing through the silent halls. The footprints led to a half-open door with 306 barely visible through layers of grime. Inside, the room was bare except for a single rusted bed frame and a shattered mirror on the wall. Sarah approached the mirror slowly. Her reflection didn't move. Evan reached out, grabbing her shoulder, but her reflection smiled before she did. The mirror cracked, splintering into jagged lines that formed the faint outline of the nurse's face. Then, from behind them, the faint click of heels returned, closer this time. The nurse's voice echoed softly through the room. "No one leaves my ward alive." The door to room 306 creaked open as Evan pushed it with the end of his flashlight. The hinges wailed like something alive. A chill rolled out from the darkness, thick and unnatural, carrying the faint scent of disinfectant and old blood. Riley hesitated at the threshold. "This place, it feels wrong," he whispered. Sarah stepped inside first. Her voice was hollow. "This is where she worked, and where they all died." The small room looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. A rusted bed bolted to the floor, peeling paint hanging like dead skin, and a dark stain spreading across the tiles beneath the bed. A clipboard hung on the wall, the ink long faded, but one word was still visible in red: experiment. Evan set the recorder on the bed. "If anyone can hear us, tell us who you are." For a moment, silence. Then, the faint static from the recorder warped into a woman's voice. She never stopped. She kept cutting even after death. Sarah gasped and grabbed Evan's arm. "It's not her talking," she said, trembling. "It's one of the patients." Riley's camera flickered again. On the small screen, he could see a pale figure crouched in the corner of the room, though to the naked eye, nothing was there. It twitched, jerked forward, and vanished into thin air. Then the room grew darker, the light dimming not from the bulbs, but as though something was absorbing it. The nurse's shadow stretched across the wall, taller and taller, her grin widening until it reached the ceiling. Sarah screamed as a cold hand brushed her neck. The whisper came again, much closer, more forceful. "Don't let her finish the experiment." The walls of room 306 seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with every terrified breath the team took. Evan's flashlight flickered violently before going out completely, plunging them into darkness. Only Riley's camera light remained, a trembling cone of illumination in a sea of black. Sarah clutched her chest. "She's here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's angry." A figure began to form in the far corner, faint at first, then solidifying into the shape of a woman in a blood-stained nurse's uniform. Her face was pale, eyes empty, lips stretched in that inhuman grin. In her hand, she held a rusted scalpel. Evan took a step forward, trying to steady his voice. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to understand." The nurse tilted her head, bones cracking audibly. Her grin widened. The walls around them began to bleed, thin dark streaks running down from the ceiling. The recorder on the bed clicked on by itself, the same voice repeating over and over. She never stopped. She never stopped. Riley backed away, filming everything. "We have to go," he shouted. But the door slammed shut, locking them inside. The temperature dropped to near freezing. Their breath came out in clouds. Sarah's eyes rolled back. Her voice changed again, deeper, layered, as if dozens spoke through her. She used them, cut them open, promised to cure them, but she made monsters instead. The nurse moved closer, each step echoing like thunder. Evan raised his flashlight, and for a split second, saw dozens of shadowy patients behind her, stitched eyeless, writhing in silence. Then the light burst, and everything went black. When it flickered back, they were standing outside the hospital gates. The building loomed quietly behind them, as if nothing had happened. Riley checked his camera. The footage ended in room 306, with the nurse turning slowly toward the lens, whispering, "Next."